So, hey everyone, I'm in Los Angeles, so it's early here, 8 a.m. In fact, I was a little nervous because I had a nanny come in early. So, I got a lot of kids. She came at like 7:57, I think, so about 3 minutes before this all started. So, the format we're going to do today is I'll do a few, 15 or 20 minutes, like a short session on just some basic ideas. Some will be some highlights from predictable revenue, some for the other book, and also just that would also include just some basic tactical things around outbound. And then we'll have, I don't know, a half hour or so just for any kind of questions that you have. So, yeah, Osvaldo. I'll sort of keep an eye on the chat, but maybe, but not really till I take a break. Let me just share my screen. And I don't know if anyone has not heard of or read Predictable Revenue. And again, the newer one is called From Impossible to Inevitable. I'll show you a picture. It's a lot of syllables. Share my screen. Here we go. All right. And here's the two books. And just if the Predictable Revenue really has a lot of details around how I create an outbound process at Salesforce. The Impossible book is very different. It's really more of a growth book. So people call the Predictable Revenue book a sales Bible. Jason Lemkin, so Jason founded SaaStr. In fact, there's a first SaaStr event in Europe in Paris, June 15th, which I'm going to be at. So if anyone is going to that, wants to go, you can say hi, meet in person, June 15th in Paris. But the Impossible book is more of a growth book. So, and I'll tell you a bit more about what that means. So I left Salesforce in 2006 and worked with a lot of companies since then, whether big or small, USA, international, focused primarily on outbound prospecting, helping them build that team. So we've seen a lot of mistakes and what goes wrong. So it's been, never thought I'd be in sales, but it's where life takes you, right? So worked at Salesforce, my co-author worked at EchoSign, and Acquia was an example of one of the companies I've worked with to help them get past 100 million. Just a fun fact, big family. Some of you I saw know that, may not, but got 9 kids. I don't think we have any photos with everybody at one place. It's almost impossible. Great motivation to make money, which will bring me to this. The short answer, even why I do this, is because I only got married 7 years ago, by the way. So you can try to do the math, 9 kids in 7 years. But I was single, got married, and there's this moment where, that first moment where, oh, I'm not single. I can't sort of screw around making money. I have to. It really was an oh shit moment where I have to make more money, right? And I grew my own income more than 10 times. And I've seen this with companies as well. So especially the last 5 years or so, really focusing on what's the difference between companies that grow fast and the ones that plateau or grow slower. So the couple topics today. Now, there's more. I try to pick up just a shorter section just to make sure we're covering some of the basics on the sales front. But when you're growing faster, to grow faster to scale sales, you're working really to solve problems, but you're also creating newer problems in the. So one of the things, for example, one of the reasons that some companies struggle is they don't have the right sales leader. I mean, you could have the wrong leader in any position, and it takes courage to recognize that, especially if you've worked with them for, a while, for years maybe, and to have that conversation. So again, it's the example of growing faster. It creates new problems, right? It's not just like heaven where all your problems are solved. And Jason Lemkin was the one who came up with this idea, is just sort of defining the different types of sales leaders at different stages. So, up into say $1 million, you tend to have or want more of an evangelist. And then as you start to have some sales, how do you make them a little more repeatable from say, $1 million to 10 million, right? 10 million, how do you then just go big, right? Just scale. And that those skills and attitude tend to be different. And at some point you're big enough, you just are running things by the numbers as a sales leader. So how do you make sure you're the right person at the right stage? So for CEOs, when you're hiring a VP of sales, which is a really, people in sales and VPs of sales are really easy to mishire. It's got to be one of the, at least in Silicon Valley, I think the average tenure for a VP of sales is something like 15 months or 18 months. It's less than 2 years. So some of the clues when you're talking to the right person, you should feel like you're learning a lot from them. Right? You should not feel like you're teaching them something, how to do their job. When they come in, they should be able to upgrade the talent, whether they're bringing people in they knew from before, or they just have a good eye for hiring. So in other words, the way that feels to an executive is you just have a little more confidence in your people. You may not be able to put your exact finger on the difference, but you just feel some more trust in the team. You should see results within one sales cycle, which should be revenue, but if you have a long sales cycle, it might be other things like definite pipeline, process, people, like there's tangible improvement, immediately. And last is, don't be blinded by the resume. Just because someone worked at a fancy place, and especially a big company, doesn't mean they're going to be great for you, right? So let's check the chat. So one of the, at least from what I've seen, a lot of VPs of sales were hired, like, let's get a VP now from Salesforce. And they come into a smaller company. And they were someone who has always worked at big companies. And they did very well at a big company, but they're used to having a lot of resources. They have someone who can write their collateral for them, do their expense reports. In a small company where they have to get their hands dirty, they might have to sell themselves. They might have to do their own expense reports, their own sales collateral. They struggle. So the main idea, though, is specialization. When you have a sales team, and for a lot of you, I hope this is review, right? Rather than having one person do everything, prospecting, closing, account management, inbound lead response, like that it works really poorly compared to when you specialize and everyone has their unique job to do, just like a sports team. Right? So I don't know any sports teams, like in soccer, if the coach said, all right, everybody go out there and score and defend and pass, how would that wouldn't work. So you have attackers, midfield, defenders, goalie. Yeah, so why don't we do that in sales? So it's changing. That's probably not fast enough. And these are the four core roles. If you have inbound leads, make sure you have someone to respond to them. And you probably need someone dedicated. It's 100, couple hundred leads, 300 leads a month. At some point, you need someone who's dedicated to that. If you have fewer than that, of course, you're juggling a couple things. Outbound, dedicated outbound prospectors, right? New business, people, closers, closing new customers, and then all the different kinds of post-sales roles, which could include account management, or customer success, services, and so on. Right? You have to specialize them. The exact way you do this varies company to company. The principle is focus. People who can do fewer things better in harmony. So I'm hoping I don't have to sell you here on the idea of this. I just don't know, actually. I find that this is changing. More companies are adopting this idea, especially in the startup and tech world. But some companies, or they're doing it, but maybe they're doing it a bit, not going as far as they should. So just one clue is, if you have SDRs and you've got inbound and inbound leads, and they're doing outbound prospecting, they really need to be separate, right? I don't think I've ever seen it when you have SDR team and the people are doing inbound and outbound, except if you have like one person, right? And they have to juggle the two. Right? Those inbound and outbound do not mix on the SDR team. So when you do the specialization and go further, it gives you better insights, better scalability at farm team system. And you're just going to struggle if you don't do this or don't do it the right way. So if you have questions on specialization, of course, we'll have time for that. Just a common ratio, one inbound lead responder, probably can handle like 400 leads a month by hand, where there's like a human touch or human review. So of course, not excluding things that are sort of auto handled. And one prospector, the prospector to salesperson ratio, it might even be 2 prospectors to 1 salesperson if it's like really big deals. Don't see that often, but 1 prospector to a salesperson. The thing is, you don't want one prospector to support more than 4, maybe 5, right? But more than 4 salespeople, because then they get spread too thin. So the next big idea is lead generation, right? This is a lot about what predictable revenue was about. That lead generation is your lever for growth, right? that if you have an amazing product, but if you don't have a predictable lead system, you're going to struggle. If you have a way to generate leads predictably, you can get a lot of other things wrong and you'll still do okay. The key idea of the 3 types of leads, because a lead is not a lead is not a lead. So word of mouth or seeds, right? They're the best, but they're really hard to grow, right? So these all have pros and cons. At some point, you generally want all 3. And B2B companies will definitely want all 3. Services companies, not always. But seeds are word of mouth, so customer referrals, relationships, anything that Steven's referred to you, right? That's seeds. Nets are marketing, right? You're casting a wide net. And outbound sales would be the targeted, list-driven business development, whether it's you're prospecting for customers or prospecting for partners. So the important point, they're all different. They have different funnels, different metrics. They might have different sales cycle lengths, and outbound is slower than inbound. Different deal sizes, and the way you generate them can be different. The way that you process them in your CRM can be different. The teams can be different. So the place where this originated was, board meetings where they would say, all right, we did $10 million last year with 1,000 leads. So to do 20 million next year, we need 2,000 leads. And that's not true because these are all different. So I'm going to talk more about outbound prospecting before we get to the Q&A part. So this is a picture from Predictable Revenue, right? This is basically the funnel I created at salesforce.com, where we would define our target list, the right companies, the right people, and build the list. And we'd be making calls and emails, so I found out if we could do, like 1,000 emails a month and a couple hundred calls a month, that would generate certain response rates and so on. Say 20 appointments a month, of which a certain percentage would be accepted to be opportunities, and then 20% would be closed as customers. So it created a very predictable way to generate pipeline and then revenue for a sales force. And that was sort of the genesis of Predictable Revenue, the name, which is if you can create predictable lead generation quality, then you can create predictable revenue. All right, so now it's a big thing. I think Predictable Revenue really helps spark an outbound, just a resurgence. Now there's 1 million applications and blogs and content. The example from Acquia was, and generally if you don't have an outbound team yet but want one, we suggest to start small. So Acquia they're a company in the United States in Boston. They do Drupal add-on services. But they start with 3 prospectors and took about 6 months to get the system working and tuned the way they wanted it. They saw that they expected about almost $750,000 in revenue per year from each prospector when you sort of net out the pipeline, the calls and the appointments and and so when they saw that, like, okay, we do want to break 100 million in revenue, so let's hire 40 of them. So it took them a couple of years to build the team up, but then to get to be able to add 30 or more $1 million a year in extra revenue. All right, so start small, get it working, and then scale it up. Now I mentioned all of these have pros and cons. So the advantage of outbound is that it can be very predictable. You can get into bigger companies, the ones who aren't calling you. There usually should be bigger deals than inbound, right? Because you're able to go target bigger opportunities. And it's a great complement to inbound marketing. The one problem for lots of people is it's not always a good fit for everyone. If you are a services company, maybe, maybe not. If you have only small deal sizes. So if you don't have any customer segments that are worth at least $10,000 or $20,000 in lifetime value, not a good fit. You're just not gonna make money at it. But for almost every B2B company who sells product and has at least some kind of customer segment that's worth more than that 20,000-ish lifetime value, you should be doing outbound in some way. So last part here, just some tips and some lessons I've learned from doing this, because I'm sure a lot of you have outbound teams already. But first, if you don't have one yet, just to consider, and by the way, our specialty at Predictable Revenue is helping companies get outbound off the ground, right? We're an outbound success company. So most companies, probably 90%, don't have a program in place yet, or it's just very, very small. There are some companies, and it's been like Oracle, SAP, that have something, and we're trying to, reassess it. But usually it's how you get started. So if you're in the boat where you don't have a team yet or program, just say there's these different ways that you can start. So internal team means you build your own team. And that for everyone here, because you have investors, you're B2B, that is your long-term solution. Whether you start there or not, it's a bit more up to you. The number B, the external team, means you use an outside company, and there's a lot of them, and we're just one out of probably thousands out there, to do the prospecting for you. But we only do it in the United States. So it's for companies who want to come in either here or want to prospect in the United States. I know there's companies do it in Europe, and who knows about the whole GDPR thing. So usually the external team can be, if you can't start with your own internal people, sometimes it's a good interim solution for 6 to 12 months until you can get your own team built. So we see it usually if a company wants to do outbound, they want to build a team, but they don't have sort of the management time and attention to hire people yet. Parallel as you're doing both at the same time, it's usually companies with money who are trying to just make things go faster. And D is scrappy, which is you just really have very little budget or time, and you're sort of doing it in bits and pieces as you go. And then once you get something going, at some point later, you invest in it. It's like a way to bootstrap outbound. I would say testing doesn't work. So what testing means is we're going to spend 3 months to try it out and see if it works. If it works, we'll invest in it. If it doesn't, we're not. The reason this doesn't work is either you got to do it or not. Outbound can happen as you can see results very quickly, or it can take a while depending on the niche you're in. I've seen it take as long as 9 to 12 months for a company to really get their outbound team and program dialed in, whether because they had a hard market or maybe they hired people that didn't work out. But it's this sort of range of like 3 to 12 months. So if you're going to do it, it's sort of like a startup. You can't do a startup for 3 months and see if it's going to work or not, right? You got to put in probably 2 years. In outbound, if you're going to do it, you have to expect it could take up to a year. We usually expect, say, people 6 months, but things can go wrong. And if it hasn't worked out in a year, then there's some other problem. It's usually around the people. So what we'd be looking for if you're building your own internal team, within 4 to 6 months, you would want them one prospector. So internal is, again, you have your own people inside. One prospector would be generating 5 to 15 sales qualified leads per month. And what that means is, in that range comes from, if you're doing like enterprise, very niche-y, it's going to be lower. If you're doing smaller, like highly transactional, it might be higher. Right? So it's really a range. But that means they've generated appointments for salespeople. The salespeople have accepted them, and they've all been audited. The external one, in at least 10 quality handoffs or appointments a month. And sometimes it's easier to scale that up. So, but the key point is if you have a tough niche or if you lose a key person, it might take you an extra 6 months to get there. It just happens. I'm just going to hit a few points. So if you have a team in place already, these are probably 3 of the biggest or most common problems I see. First is executive trust. So what that means is, can you trust if the outbound team is claiming that they're generating pipeline and revenue? How do you know that that's truly incremental revenue? How do you know it's not just inbound leads that got sort of like shuffled around? Right? And I learned this because Mark Benioff at Oracle saw this, where a lot of the inside salespeople were sort of shuffling things around and shuffling papers, and there wasn't true accountability. So at Salesforce, we were very, very, very strict about, if we're claiming credit for an outbound opportunity and the lead source was outbound, we audited every single opportunity to make sure that it was outbound and that it deserved credit, because we were generating probably half of the top 10 deals every month for Salesforce. And every once in a while, Mark would send me an email. He's like, "Hey, Aaron, this Penske deal, I thought this was a part you say is outbound, but we have a partner who says they sourced it." Right? That doesn't feel good to get that kind of email. But then every time I go back and do the audit trail, and we could prove that, yes, we were the outbound team. If we claim credit for it, it was sourced through outbound. Right? So we never claim credit for something that we didn't truly add value to. And when you have that and the executives know, okay, because the outbound can be very, it's hard to get a truly accurate outbound dashboard because there's a lot of subjectivity, right? So I'm actually, I have an audit process in here someplace. I think, oh yeah, audit, I mentioned right there. If you don't audit every single opportunity, you're going to get a lot of squishiness, which means salespeople are doing favors for their SDRs. Their SDRs are, you know, sort of shuffling around inbound leads. So I really can't emphasize how this is like the number one most important thing to focus on once you have a team and it's growing, or else you can't trust the numbers. Now the problem, disorganized CRM, what you want to do is manage through dashboards and get rid of all the vanity charts that tend to clutter those up, right? Because you'll see if you have a manager, they'll just put a bunch of cool charts on that aren't really useful. But as an executive, you want to be able to look at it and be like, okay, I got it. And if they can't do that, then, and when you manage through dashboards, it forces people to be more diligent in how they're using Salesforce or whatever your CRM is. So last thing, develop people, not resources. So I already mentioned, you know, no more really than like 4 salespeople, AEs, to be supported by 1 outbound SDR, or they just get spread too thin. And those salespeople should be great mentors to the SDR, right? There should be a relationship between an SDR and their salespeople, at least the outbound SDR. And probably no more than 10 reports per manager. Again, they just get spread too thin and the quality drops. So I just mentioned that relationship between the salesperson and SDRs are really important. It's vital. So what are some tips on how to make those relate? So I would say this is one of the least appreciated points of what makes outbound work, but it's one of the most important. So I'm trying to really flag this for you right now. So how do we do this? There's some things we do, like we avoid pooling. What that means is there's like 4 SDRs who are, you know, just sort of round robin or just supporting like a bunch of salespeople. You need to be tying specific SDRs to specific salespeople. I already mentioned the ratio. You know, no more. Not if a SDR supports too many salespeople, they just get scattered. The SDR should really treat the salespeople as their salespeople as customers. Like, I'm trying to make my customers happy. I'm trying to make my salespeople happy. But I set boundaries. I am not their slave. I'm not their bitch. I can say no, because some salespeople will expect SDRs to do work the salespeople need to do, or the salespeople will want SDRs to do work that is just going to waste their time. I'm happy to give examples in the Q&A if we get there. And just sitting on lots of joint sales calls are really the best way for them to learn and get at least one or more of those AEs to mentor their SDRs. When you see, the thing is, when a salesperson sees their SDR as their partner, you want them to say, wow, as a salesperson, if I invest in my SDR, they're going to be able to make me successful. So you want those salespeople to be investing in their SDR with their time, with their experience, and with their coaching. All right, I think, so actually here, for the questions, I would have you think about this as, if you need to make a major sales strategy change for this year, what would that be? Maybe you don't, maybe you do. And what's something you can do in the next 24 hours to move that forward? Or if there's something you took from this presentation, or in the questions we'll do, how do you do something right away? Because it's so easy to talk about change. It's a lot easier to talk about it than to do it. All right, so I mentioned we do help companies build outbound programs. The coaching side, we help companies build their internal teams around the world. With the outsourcing we do, we really outsource for companies who want to prospect in the United States for now. And here's my, my info. So why don't we open up to, I saw there's a couple questions. I don't know if there's a way, so if you have a question, you can throw it in the chat, or you can probably raise a hand and I can unmute you somehow. So first, actually, Stephen has a couple questions here. How do you handle the progression of SDRs? You know, is there personal development? Is there a career development route to salesperson? So one of the best things about creating this sales specialization system is you have a career path. So typically you have them start, if you have inbound leads in the inbound SDR role, then they get promoted to outbound, then to inside sales, and then to field sales. You know, obviously they can split off. Lots of people go to maybe go from prospecting to account management or customer success. And so you can define that career path. And it's really important to people to have some kind of vision for their career there, even if it's further out, to know that there is opportunity to move up. And one thing is, each time there's different ways to sort of gauge when people get promoted. I know SalesLoft has written a bunch of articles on sort of micro promotions. I mean, now there's these micro promotions. So people might have every 6 months, they go from like outbound SDR or SDR1 to SDR2. But I think what's important is that through these career paths, you do have some kind of system to know when people are ready to be promoted. So at Salesforce, for example, people would be promoted from outbound prospector to sales when obviously there is an opening, and you can't always control when openings are. So part of this is they have to be okay with a range of, it might be as fast as 8 months or 12 months, but it may not be. But they would have to do things like do a live presentation to some sales managers to test their verbal delivery. So to do that, they have to pass that before were able to be promoted to sales. Then they might have quota. Sometimes people have certain kinds of quota requirements, right? There's no one way to do it, but having more like a system for promotions rather than, all right, we feel like you're ready, is important. It gives people something to work forward to work towards. Okay. And Ben asked, hey, you mentioned that inbound and outbound in an SDR team don't mix. Can you explain a bit more about why that is? Stop my share. So inbound and outbound don't mix. It's a great question. They don't mix. So again, let's put aside, the exception is when you have one person and they have to juggle, or sometimes you've got a couple people and they're trying to juggle, multiple roles. So in that case, yeah, one person is doing inbound and outbound. But as soon as you can have people do the inbound and outbound full time, you need to. Okay? The reason they don't mix is because first, inbound, the cycle, the rhythm, the response time is much faster. It's like a daily rhythm. The cycle or the rhythm for outbound is like 2 to 4 weeks. It's a much slower rhythm. It takes 2 to 4 weeks to go from sort of zero to a qualified opportunity in most outbound accounts, at least B2B. So the metrics are different. If you use Salesforce, you're in inbound SDR, you're in the leads tab. And when you're doing outbound, you're in the accounts and contacts tabs. By the way, if you do use Salesforce, make sure your prospecting should be done through accounts and contacts, not through leads. Let's see if that generates any questions. So at Salesforce, we actually tested this where we had our outbound team, inbound teams. We switched from inbound and outbound to sort of enterprise, which did inbound and outbound for enterprise, and then small business, which did basically just inbound for small business. And we saw right away like a really big productivity drop, 30%. I think I wrote about this in Predictable Revenue. And people just can't juggle those two things. They're too different. It's like trying to, do this. So that's why I've never seen it work well. The reason sales specialization works is because people can do fewer things really, really well. And outbound is one of these things where you really need to do it full time to do it really well. So we've got some more questions here. There's too many people to unmute everyone, but if you want to actually ask it, you can also probably, lower all hands. I don't see a hand system here. All right, but we got another question from Rob. Do you think inbound and outbound teams should sit together as a team? Yes, I think I'm actually a big seating chart person. I'm relatively anti-remote, by the way, so let me start there. If you're starting out a program, there's some companies who their entire culture is based on virtual workers. Great, I don't know how they do it, but some people make it work. In fact, we have a client called ESW that has 5,000 employees around the world, and they're all virtual. There's no offices. They're all contractors. There's no HR department. Like, that's kind of crazy, but it works for them. But usually, especially in B2B, you want your teams to sit together to learn, especially at the very beginning stages, first couple of years when everything's getting defined. So it's probably more, I can't say if it's more important that the prospectors sit next or close to the inbound team. Even better is if you have some salespeople in there as well, because that's where how a lot of people learn is you're hearing people talk, you're sitting next to them, you could turn around and say hi. And I would change people's seating charts every 3 months, because that's just one way you learn is you just shake up their environment, and they get to sit next to new people and learn new things. And I just always try to move people around that way. So let's see here. I got a couple of questions. What do you think are the qualities of top outbound SDRs? And sorry, I saw Ben had, there's a few questions here, so I'll get to them. The top outbound SDRs tend to, they take initiative. They're the ones that they're not waiting around and where you need to tell them what to do all the time. Right? You don't need to hold their hand. So they take initiative. They solve problems on their own. They're trying things on their own. Right? They're coachable. Right? They listen to you. They want to succeed. So it's more important. They're trying to figure out what's going to work. The success is more important than their ego. And they like to help people around them. They like to help customers. Right? So in fact, we have a hiring guide I can share with Stephen after this. If Stephen, you just remind me. Okay, so Ben, Ben, I think I answered that question. Sorry about inbound, outbound. Let's see if Stephen has another one. Have you seen tech or data improve the science of outbound through better profiling? There's a lot of companies out there that do, list building, automatic list building, and, give us your customers and we're going to find all the other ones that are just like yours. I think like everything else, sometimes that works well. A lot of times it doesn't. So I've had clients that have had success with that. Sorry, I don't know if you guys can hear the dogs barking in the back. So not only do we have 9 kids, we also have 3 dogs. So it's never quiet here. I can't point to any place where on list building and profiling that I've seen it like some tool where it always works well for everybody. I hate to say it, but with data, it really is, it's just, everyone's so different. It really is, you got to try a bunch of the tools out there and see what works best for you. So there's a data strategy that we suggest, and there's certain recommended tools, but we haven't found, like any kind of killer list building or, profiling applications that work beyond sort of special situations. Okay, so here we go. Ralph, I like your question. Can you clarify why outbound sales should be in accounts and contacts and inbound leads and leads? Okay, here we go. When you're doing outbound prospecting, if you are doing you should be doing account-based prospecting, which means you're really doing a list of accounts. Here's our ideal customer. Let's go find another 20, 100, 1,000 companies like that. I'd be surprised. So when I say account-based prospecting, you're building lists of companies. List-based prospecting is really, you're just building lists of people. That can work. In fact, we do some of that. But for most B2B companies, unless you're doing really small transactions and you have a really easy sale, it's probably not ideal. But so for the vast majority of companies I've ever seen in B2B, account-based is the way to go. And because you're going to a company, you may not know the right person. You almost always have multiple conversations with people there. Even if it's a really small, like we had a client that was sold to dental doctor's offices that might have just 15 or 20 people. You still need an account because you might talk to the receptionist, you might talk to the office manager and the owner. And unless you use the accounts and contacts area of Salesforce, if you're in Salesforce, you can't keep all those conversations in one place, right? In the leads tab is really meant to be a clearinghouse, like a sorting house for all these leads coming to you to sort of sift through what's good and what's not. So it's great if you upload 500 conference leads and you're like, what's value be here, what's crap? But it's not meant to be for account-based prospecting. I hope that answers your question, because accounts and contacts is the way to go. Okay, Geo, question. How would you change the approach for mid-market versus enterprise accounts? What are the pitfalls that sales leaders fall into here? Okay, well, there's not that many differences for mid-market versus enterprise, really, in technique. It's not that different. What I've seen, the biggest difference is really because enterprises can be so much bigger and more complicated that the SDRs tend to need a bit more skill with things like, setting the accounts up in Salesforce so that all those, or in your CRM if you don't use Salesforce, setting a lot of enterprises have lots of divisions, and you want to know what all those are because maybe you have conversations or customers at some of those divisions. And so the skill in mid-market, you don't really need the same skill as when you're doing enterprise. It's just to even organize all those divisions and people within your CRM so you know what you've got. So that's a pretty tactical difference. There can be some difference in sort of buying behavior. On the prospecting side, it's not as big a deal. And the sales side, it's much more complicated to sell enterprise. On the prospecting side, it's not as much of a difference. Yeah, you might need to be more familiar with, maybe more people, there's just more ways to get lost in the enterprise, more divisions, but the tactics and techniques don't really change at that point, at least for the prospecting. Let's see here, hold on. So Geo, for enterprise accounts, would you bring the handover point further up in the sales cycle versus mid-market accounts, perhaps the first response? Okay, so for enterprise accounts, for both enterprise and mid-market, so here's the standard process. You want the SDRs to be doing most of the early qualification. You want the SDRs to be doing the first phone calls. You want the SDRs to be building out the account and finding out the information to see if it's a fit or not. Because usually bringing a salesperson in too early is just gonna waste the salesperson's time. Now, the exception is if there's like a special list of accounts that the salesperson is working personally and the SDR is helping them with. If there is like you get a response from, you're trying to talk to the CEO of Pfizer or the executive you're trying to get to, and they respond, and you might let the salesperson know, hey, do you want to come in on this early? So it's more of an exceptions when you bring the salesperson in right away. Just because it's enterprise, look, people are people, whether they're enterprise or mid-market. So don't get all impressed that they're like a C-level something at the Fortune 100. They're just people. And the process that works is this SDR is there to take the load off to do a lot of the early grunt work for the salesperson, so that the salesperson can focus on where their time is most valuable, right? Qualification calls with, again, the right people at the right companies. So again, I would say that because, going back, if you have a good relationship between the SDR and the AE, the SDR will know more likely if there is a time I need to bring them in early, when is that? And the AE can coach the SDR on how to better do the early qualification on their own without needing the AE. Because what I've seen is that if you take someone who has not that much experience, and you just give them a good system, some basic training, and the right questions, the SDR can do a lot more of the qualification than you might realize, including a lot of the first phone calls. So I can't say, it says CON, so maybe it's Connor. It cuts off your name. Yeah, Connor. You mentioned the deal size of 10 to 20,000 for outbound makes sense. And I'm talking about lifetime value. So even if you have, it's 5,000 a year, but you're staying for a few years, okay, not just order size. If you have a short sales cycle selling into small and medium businesses where you can get the KDMs, I'm not sure what KDM means, and generate large volume of sales qualified leads, could it work? So, okay, so basically here's the question. If we sell smaller deals, if we can, if we have like a fast sales cycle and get our numbers right, can we make money? So yes. So what happens is if you have a smaller deal size, so again, let's say smaller customer value size. If you don't have any customers that are worth more than $10,000 or $20,000 in lifetime value, right? Then really, whether you make money or not depends on the efficiency of your funnel and the speed of your sales cycle. So then it just comes up to the numbers. So you can still invest in outbound. And Connor, I don't know if you have outbound now or not, but I've seen people, it's possible to make money at it, or at least to create value, but you don't really know until you're in it and you're seeing how well it works. How much can you optimize it? So it's a question mark at that point. So I missed, there was another question. Okay, maybe not. Okay, makes sense. Okay. From Robel, what do you think the qualification criteria should be for an outbound SDR? Okay, great question. So I should actually add this to the presentation, that when you have a team and if you have inbound SDRs and outbound SDRs, the qualification criteria is usually different. So remember, inbound and outbound, right? Different process, different people, different metrics, different qualification criteria. Inbound and outbound have different funnels. They should meet the salesperson. The salesperson should not really have, for the salesperson, they have one funnel, right? They get their meetings, whether they're inbound and outbound, they move on and so on. But inbound and outbound are different. I will throw in one caveat that if you have had lots of inbound leads and salespeople who are selling that, and then you add outbound, often you need the salespeople. They're just used to sort of getting stuff, being reactive, and they often have to add new skills in order to handle outbound appointments effectively, because they can't just show up and do a demo. They actually need to sell. So going back to your question, sorry for the little digression, the qualification criteria is different. In inbound, you tend to have more criteria. So it might include, could even be budget. It could be whether you do BANT, budget, authority, need, timing, right? However you do it, really there's no right way. BANT is common, there's other ones. But you might have things like budget and timing as part of your inbound lead qualification criteria. That was a lot of syllables. Inbound lead qualification criteria, inbound lead qualification criteria. Wow. Okay, but an outbound, different. Because if we are outbound in part, we are helping take a new idea to market. We're helping find people who may not know about what we're doing or even this new space, and helping show them a better way. So things like budget and timing are not as important in outbound. But what is the most important is pain or need and authority. So in other words, in outbound, what I would always ask is, I always say the term baseline. So this is like the starting point for outbound qualification criteria. Everyone changes it a bit, but are we talking to someone of authority? Are they an influencer, decision maker, someone who can make something happen, or at least get us to the right person? Is there a pain or problem that we can help them with? And the third one, are they interested in the next step? So, because if that we're talking to a senior executive and they have a problem and they see that we can help them, they can make the budget and timing happen. So we want to be aware of budget and timing, but it's not something that is standard on outbound qualification criteria at the beginning. That might come in later, but that the salesperson introduces after a discovery call and through their own process. I got you. So thanks, Connor. Key decision makers, KDM, great. Okay, small startup. There's often only one salesperson. Oh, great. Okay. So the question is, I'm one salesperson. I might even be the founder. I got to do everything. So, what do I do if it's just me? So the same principle applies, which is specialization, but you do it a bit differently, which is you specialize your time. So if you need to prospect, you might block out Wednesdays or 2 hours a day for Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Or if you really, I'm not calling all the customers I need to, sort of that customer success, block out that time. So in other words, block out focus time for whatever is the thing you're not getting to. That's how you start with that specialization, even when you're one person. And if you're two people, so if there are any CEOs, entrepreneurs here who don't have salespeople yet, usually you start with hiring a junior. So if you're an entrepreneur or CEO who hasn't hired salespeople before, who hasn't built sales before, usually you should start by hiring a junior person like an SDR to handle some of that lead gen for you, whether it's inbound lead gen or outbound, because you can sort of grow them, develop them, and then you can either promote them. So maybe they get promoted to sales, or maybe you can bring in a salesperson to work with you, which is just a much lower risk way to get your sales team started. Because if you haven't been in sales, hired sales, built a team, it's really easy to be sold and you just hire the wrong people. And it's really expensive to bring in a salesperson. So you're a CEO. I hire a salesperson to take over sales and it doesn't work and I have to let them go. So not only did I not get sales, I just wasted a whole bunch of time. Really common. It's a much lower risk way to bring in a junior person first, get some systems, get some leads and so on, and then bring in a closer if you need that. So let me go back here to the questions. Good. We got some good questions here, everybody. How effective is outbound towards C-level executives? From Andrea. So it's very effective. I'm not sure. So the stats or best practices, I don't have like stats specifically, but except on the pipeline side, where most of the prospecting that we do, that we teach and our customers do really is two C-level executives, or should be, when that makes sense. Sometimes you don't sell to the C-level, but you at least want to start when you get to C-level, whether they're buying or not, and then if they're not, still get referred down to the VP or the director or whoever. So you always want to start high and go down. It's a lot harder to start low and sell up. So the practice is to start high, sell down, and then if you're not getting traction there, if you're not getting information or insights, you can go prospect lower. There's a lot of value to prospecting to anyone in the company as a way to learn and do research about the company. You can call the sales line, you can call the support line, you can email, or anyone you can talk to could be a source of useful information that can help you then either disqualify the company if they're not a fit, or go back up to the top with better information. But yeah, it's very effective. Okay, sorry, here. Linking back to my previous question, should the call be sales accepted as long as outbound qualification criteria has been met? Okay, so the question I believe is, so if the prospector is doing the qualification, and should it be, okay, I think what you're saying is, if I'm a prospector and I'm meeting the qualification criteria and I pass it to the salesperson, should they sort of automatically accept it because they meet the qualification criteria? Let me know if I got that right or wrong, but the answer is no. The reason the sales accepted, so yeah, the salesperson, you have to work out what ultimately they're the ones who accept things, and it should be standard across the team as much as possible. Salespeople, some people want earlier things and some people want later things. So, but you got to have a system in this case where yes, there's consistency. Again, I would use the same criteria. So let me just walk you through a little more detail here. So generally how this would work would be the SDR, outbound SDR has the first call. We call that an Are We a Fit call, AWAF, AWAF. They have that call. And it's really, hey, is there something here or not? It's not meant to sell. It's meant to, hey, is this worth our time to have a next step? So in that case, they are using those criteria. Is this person of influence or authority? Is there a need we can help them with? Are they interested? For example, if you're trying to sell to the CEO, and I'm a prospect, I'm on the phone with the marketing manager, I'm not going to bring in I'm not going to bring in my salesperson yet because I haven't gotten it far enough. I need to get the opportunity farther along. So let's say we're talking to the right person, there's a need, there's timing. Okay, let's set up another call with the salesperson. And the salesperson as well, at this point, we start with the same criteria. The salesperson has to go through, is there authority, need, and interest in the next step? Now, you can change this a bit. Everyone does to fit their own business. And if it's sometimes in some markets, it makes sense to ask about budget, sometimes timing, sometimes not. Just that at that point depends. But it's not sales qualified lead or sales accept until the salesperson says, yes, I want this. I'm accepting it. I'm going to take it. And if they don't, they have to justify it. And if they do, they have to justify it. So again, because we're going to audit every opportunity, right? Because we don't want salespeople doing favors for their SDRs because it just teaches them bad habits. It's like cheating the system. Because look, they appreciate their SDR. Sometimes they want to throw them a freebie, like, I know you worked hard on this, and okay, I'll just take it. No, that don't fly. So sales accepted is when a salesperson really takes it. And the place where you need to, it does take some training, it does take some repetition, consistency on the sales side and the prospector side to define, your qualification criteria, how that handoff works, when it should be accepted, and how everything gets logged in your CRM for consistency. Okay, so, and sometimes, because ultimately the task, if we don't have an honest process and with at least some level of consistency, it's not going. You can't trust the results, and it's not going to be predictable. All right, my thoughts on FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I think it's great when you can do it, but I think it's a little less common now because I think people, because there's so much more information, there's either it's changed, there's less FUD, or it's changed. It's people aren't suffering from a lack of information now like they used to. Now they're suffering from over information. So rather than FUD, what I would focus on, which I think is much more useful to your prospects, is it's really like simplification. It's trying to what is really the few things they really need to know? Like, how do we present the fewest ideas or make it really simple or clear for our prospects as to what their choice should be, or even if we're a fit or not. So clarity is a lot more valuable to prospects now than things like FUD. Everyone's just overwhelmed. There's just so much information. There's so many apps. There's so many options. I have so many stuff going on. If you can make it simple for me, it's going to be easier for me to listen to you, invest in you, and maybe move forward with you. Because you just want to cut the confusion down for people. I think that's all the questions here for now. Anyone who will hop on and say something live? Stephen, or someone else?
Well, I'll start off by saying thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's been a great session. And I got the sense that with the flow of questions, that could have kept going for quite a while.
We could spend, forever. There's like 1,000 things you need to do well, either to build a team or grow it. We could get into everything.
I'd love to dive into a conversation. Maybe this is for another one where we talk more about some of the topics you covered from Impossible to Inevitable, about really nailing a niche.
Yeah, I thought about actually bringing that on. I think I actually took it out just because of time.
Yeah.
So,
it's a different topic, and maybe a different audience, a different mindset, anyway. But
yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I would really, especially if anyone is under a couple million in revenue, especially, it's really useful for anyone. If you go to fromimpossible.com, first of all, you should get the book, right? If that's what Stephen said, but you can still get the Nail a Niche chapter free. Download a free sample. And Nail a Niche is really the most common reason companies struggle to grow is because you're not ready and you haven't nailed the niche yet. And it goes through sort of what that means, how to do it, exercises, tips, and so on. I've heard people say it's gold. It's incredibly valuable. So this is where we could do another session on it sometime. I have probably a recording someplace, or you could just grab the chapter here at fromimpossible.com.
Yeah. I've certainly read the book. I'd encourage everybody else to. I think it's a really good read. Yeah. You absolutely nailed it with that last point. Focus on clarity and keep it really simple, and focus on things that matter. And this is it's not overly complex stuff. Though there is a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, more is not better these days.
No, not necessarily. I think, Aaron, when we spoke last time, obviously, and you gave a little bit of pitch about yourself. I think you also do individual kind of coaching work as well for execs and sales leaders.
Yeah. So most of what we do at Predictable Revenue is helping companies build outbound programs. So whether you want to build your own team and get it right the first time, or you're not ready to and you want to start prospecting in the United States, and we can do that for you. So that's most of it. Sometimes we also do things like assessments. If you have, a little bit of a specialty of mine personally, not the company, it's called like hyper growth assessments and plans, where you just trying to get a sense of like what's the best way to grow. Executive coaching, not like coaching as like personal coaching, but more, you want your business to grow and you want to know exactly what you need to do or what you're missing. That's a specialty of mine, sort of find that out and point it out and make sure that you, again, are focused on the fewest things to get the biggest impact this year and not getting drowned in all the 1,000 things you think you should do.
Yeah.
Or just predictablerevenue.com.
I could do with a bit more of that.
Everybody, this is the world of overwhelm. Everyone could.
Any last comments from anybody else who want to put their hand up and say anything to the group, or just a shout out? Thank you. That'd be great. Otherwise, I think we should let you get back to make sure you water the dogs. It's probably getting hot.
Yeah.
Let
me see here. There's a last chat. Oh yeah, people saying thanks. Yeah, thanks. And hey, reminder, if you want to meet in person, SaaStr Europe. I have nothing to do with this. He's just my co-author and friend, but I'm just going to speak. I'm taking my wife. You can find it. Oh, here we go. In Paris, June 15th, I think. Yeah.
We're going to be there. So Joss White is there. We're heading up a diversity focus for Jason, supporting him with speaker outreach. And we've got three of our portfolio plus one of our GPs talking there as well.
Yeah. So this would be great. It's really worthwhile. And sorry, Osvaldo just asked if we're still running Predictable University courses. So yeah, we still are. If you have a team, and this is really if you have a team and you want to better onboard or train people, we have these virtual live classes from Predictable University. But the point is, if you want help with outbound, you can just reach out to me and I can point you in the right direction, whether it's some of the resources we have or classes or consulting or whatever. And I mentioned, so there's a hiring guide too, Stephen. I'll make sure I forward to you, and the slides.
Yeah.
And recording. You guys get all the stuff. By the way, at the SaaStr event, the topic I'm speaking on is nailing a niche. So, but hey, I really appreciate it, Stephen. Thanks for reaching out originally and for the support of the book and the message. And hopefully someday I'll get to see you guys in London too. Don't have that on the docket yet, just with all the kids. But we're going to Scotland in July, but it's probably not very close to any of you guys. Maybe some of you.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. We haven't got any companies up there, but
we're going to be in Skye for a couple of weeks and Inverness for a couple of weeks. The whole family trip.
Wonderful.
It's like a tour. It's like a tour of a trip because it'll be like 14 people between all the kids and adults. Yeah.
We could all come with you, and you really wouldn't make that much.
Wouldn't even notice.
No. Sounds fun.
No.
Aaron, thank you ever so much. Really appreciate your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.